Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this planning meeting of Melton Borough Council. I am Councillor Alan Thwaites, the Chair of Planning. Just some housekeeping. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest the park entrance. And I hope tonight we don't have to, not at this temperature. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. Please put your phone to silent during this meeting. We will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members speaking, please raise your hand if you wish to speak directly into the microphone in front of you. Please remember to turn it off once you have finished. Members voting will be by raised hands. I'd like to introduce those present. The members here this evening, to my right, Councillors Pip Allnutt, Ian Atherton, Siggy Atherton, Ronan Brown and Marilyn Gordon. To my left, Councillors James Mason, Margaret Glancy, Pat Cumbers, Richard Sharp and Don Pritchett. We have a team of officers present who are, to my left, Legal Services Manager Tom Pickwell. To my right, Planning Development Manager Louise Parker, Assistant Director for Planning Sarah Legg, Planning Officer Amy Smith, Planning Development Team Leader Chaya Pancholi, and Senior Planning Officer Richard Redford. We also have our Democratic Services team present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes, and that's Sarah Evans and Bev Graham. On the agenda tonight, apologies for absence. We've got one apology, which is Councillor Lee Higgins, and Councillor Richard Sharp, as I've introduced, has been appointed as his substitute. Councillor Lee Higgins has taken himself out as he's going to speak as a ward councillor. Item 2, the minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of October 2024. I'd like a proposer for those minutes, if possible. Councillor Ian Atherton, and a seconder, Councillor Margaret Glancy. Anybody like to make any comments about those minutes? Or Marilyn, sorry, what would you like?
Yeah, I don't know if Councillor Don Pritchett would remember, but at the end, before the last proposal to go ahead with the application, he did say, but he didn't put his light on, so it didn't go on YouTube. I don't know if you can remember this, Don, but you said something about putting drainage on the garden. And I think it was to help the 1 and 2 Riverside. I don't know if you can remember saying that just before. And I thought, wow, yes, even though I went against it, yeah.
I think that might be mistaken identity, that one. It would have been, could have been somebody else, but it wasn't me. It could have been over this side, but it wasn't me.
It's just that I can remember looking across and seeing straight when you were saying it, that's all. Okay, well, if no one can remember it, then there's nothing we can do, but I just thought I'd mention it. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Is there any other comments on the minutes? Yeah. In that case, then, can I ask for those in favour of the minutes? And abstentions? 1 abstention. Yeah, okay. Otherwise, unanimous. Yeah, thank you. Declarations of interest. Members to declare any interest as appropriate in respect of items to be considered this evening. Do I have anybody with declarations of interest? Councillor Glancy?
Yes, I have family that live in Twyford, so I think just for the safety, I think I need to declare a perception of possible bias due to the fact that my family actually lives in Twyford, and I understand the impact it may or may not have on them.
So you are planning to withdraw from the meeting? Yeah.
I will sit in the public gallery if that's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And just to be noted in the minutes, Councillor Glancy will step into the public gallery. Yeah. So we'll move on to the schedule of applications. There's only one application on this evening, which is application 23/00870/FUL, which is the land, I won't give the OS number, but the Leicester Road, Twyford and Thorpe Suchville. Twyford and Thorpe, is that correct? Twyford and Thorpe. And I believe Amy's going to make the presentation this evening, so please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. This application is presented to committee tonight as we have received 13 objections and a petition of 157 signatures from the public. As an update prior to presenting the details of the application, an objection was received from Gadsby Parish Council, which is not reported in the committee report. The letter was received on the 1st of October, is available to view on the website, and I was aware of it as I was assessing the application. Their objections relate to the potential increase of flooding within the Gadsby Parish and the impact of construction traffic on villagers. These matters are considered in the report. We have also received an update to the noise impact assessment, which clarified an error of the number of inverters and substations proposed within the survey and the site layout plan. The noise assessment is now in accordance with the proposed 4 inverters and 1 substation as shown on the site layout. The proposed noise levels of the updated assessment are still under the background noise levels recorded at the sensitive receptors in close proximity to the site, and therefore the assessment at 8.5.6 of the report is still relevant. The application site is located approximately 1 kilometre to the west of Twyford and has a total site area of 16.03 hectares. The solar panels would be sited on 3 fields, totaling 14.5 hectares in area. Vehicular access is gained via an existing access from Leicester Road, which serves Friesland Farm. The site is located in flood zone 1 and public right-of-way D66 passes through the site in an east to west direction. The site is confirmed to be grade 3B and grade 4 agricultural land, which is not best and most versatile. The proposed development comprises the installation and operation of a solar farm for a temporary period of 40 years. The output of the solar farm would generate a capacity of 10 megawatts AC through approximately 22,500 solar panels, a substation, 4 inverters and CCTV cameras, as shown on the site layout plan submitted with the application. Moving on to specific elements of the proposal, we start with flood and drainage. Gadsby Brook is located 200 metres to the north of the site. The site itself is located in flood zone 1 and generally has a very low risk of surface water flooding. There are minor areas of low risk surface water flooding on the site, which are shown in the light blue on the image on the screen. The site boundary is outlined in red. Both the Environment Agency and Leeds Local Flood Authority were consulted and have confirmed that they have no objections. Conditions are recommended by the Leeds Local Flood Authority, which require a detailed drainage scheme for the disposal of surface water to be submitted and agreed prior to commencement. The conditions are considered to meet the 6 tests as set out in the NPPF, which require planning conditions to be necessary, relevant to planning and to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise and reasonable. The Leeds Local Flood Authority will be consulted on the receipt of the drainage details and will advise if the proposed details are acceptable. As the conditions are pre-commencement, this means development cannot lawfully commence until those conditions are discharged. In relation to construction phase and the impact on highways, as I have already mentioned, access to the site is gained via an existing agricultural access which serves Friesland Farm from Leicester Road. A construction traffic management plan is submitted by the applicant and has been assessed by the local highway authority. They are satisfied with the CTMP and as such it is secured by a condition at 10.6 of the report. The CTMP includes details of the 27-week construction period. It also restricts delivery hours and numbers of construction vehicles and specifies routing of construction traffic. To confirm, there has been no objection raised by the local highway authority to the proposed development. These next few images demonstrate the landscape character and visual aspects of the site. This first image on screen shows a view from footpath D66, taken during a site visit earlier this year. The view looks northeast towards the site, with Thorpe Satchfield seen in the distance, approximately 1.5 kilometres away. Again, this image was taken during the same site visit from footpath I-94 to the west of the site, looking east. Twyford is seen in the distance, approximately 1.5 kilometres away. These next images are taken from the landscape and visual impact assessment submitted with the application. This view looks west towards the site from a viewpoint west of Twyford. The site extents are marked on the site to the right of the screen. These next two images are taken from two different viewpoints from the north of the site, looking south and southeast respectively. Again, the extents of the site are marked on the images, and the site can be seen from these viewpoints. The development would retain the existing landform of the site and the historic field pattern and hedgerows. Soft landscaping scheme proposes to mitigate the temporary harm through screening and softening of the appearance of the development through additional planting of trees and shrubs and maintenance of the existing hedgerows. The negligible harm would be temporary in the nature of the 40-year lifetime of the development. To summarise, the proposed development would result in substantial positive benefits and some limited landscape harm. The decommissioning of the site would be secured through planning condition, seen at paragraph 10.18 of the report. There are no objections from statutory consultees. Planning conditions would also secure drainage details, the construction traffic management plan and ecological enhancement. It is therefore recommended that the application is approved subject to the conditions at section 10 of the report.
Thank you, Amy. Do any members have any questions for clarification from the officer? Councillor Pritchett.
For that run through, Amy. First point, could you get the site picture up, please, again? The picture of the red area around the site.
Would you like the site location plan or the site layout?
Yeah, the red light, just the one that you did earlier, the red.
Just tried it.
But when it comes up, I'll tell you what I was going to say. I think for the benefit of members, to make it clear, the Gadsby parish that has a neighbourhood plan, the border of the parish is the ditch that runs down the west side of that, the square. So that is the parish boundary. There's no neighbourhood plan the east side of that, Twyford, and all the protected view arrows in the Gadsby neighbourhood plan go across the parish. They don't point in that particular direction.
Sorry, what's the question, Councillor?
Well, I'm just making it clear what didn't come out, point of clarity. So I've got some questions now. Consultees. Nick Sack, firstly, Environmental Health and the Conservation Officer. I think these are MBC consultees. We don't seem to have had a response back from them. Why were they consulted? How important?
You okay with that, Amy?
They were consulted, however, they are not statutory consultees, so they are consulted to give any advice if they feel it beneficiary. However, we don't need to wait for their responses to make a decision on the application.
Sorry, didn't cover walkers in the vicinity of the site or going through it. And I would have thought our environmental health people could have interpreted the decibels in the report. I've had a look at the report prior to the 4 inverters you've just mentioned, and having a look at the information available and definitions of what they mean in practical terms, and the time you're within it, I don't see it as a particular problem. Now, the conservation officer, the response from Historic England, they had no issues but referred us to our local conservation officer. I would have thought we'd have used our conservation officer on the local assets, even if it was just a nil to say, I confirm there are no issues. I'm talking about buildings here, just buildings on that one. And then you've got Nick Sack. Why? That's finance. Isn't that finance? Is he not the benefits manager? Anyway, it's not that's not significant. Moving on, there's no section in the report on cumulative impact.
Well, generally, there's no other solar farms in the area, is there?
Well, that's the work that needed to be undertaken. And I mean, when the landscape visual impact assessment was done 13 months ago, they noted one nearby within a kilometre of 2 in a contained landscape. It's a case of going to, I don't know what the rules are, 3-5 kilometres, and checking what permissions have been granted in the meantime. And if it's nil, I would have expected the work to have been reported as nil in the report.
Well, I'm disappointed it wasn't raised in the briefing, but I'm not sure that, again, how would that influence the decision tonight?
Relevant, and particularly as we're looking at the Leicestershire High Hills landscape, valleys and exposed landscapes, it would have possibly more of an impact than say 3, if there were 3, for instance, in flat land nearby. So cumulative impact has been a feature at the last one we've dealt with and at the appeal side. So even if it's nil, then I would have expected it in the report. So if we move on from that one, thank you very much for the email on the glint and glare question. That answered my question and matched my analysis of why glint and glare was not needed. In terms of the landscape visual impact assessment, is there any reason why we didn't use an independent landscape architect to assess it?
So there's no statutory requirement for us to go out externally. That assessment was done internally by me and colleagues, and we were satisfied with our outcome of the initial assessment.
What work did you do to determine that it was okay?
We conducted a site visit. We understood the background of the existing landscape character, and we assessed the harm that may come about of this type of development.
Can I just stop this, because I mean I'm getting disturbed here by why we're questioning these types of things now, and where you're going with these questions.
One more on the visualizations to clarify the questions for clarification.
So why didn't you ask them in the briefing?
Questions are entitled to be asked in the public domain.
Okay, carry on.
To fully assess the application. And the final.
No, the point I'm making is that you're picking on the officer here, and I'm not going to stand for that. Yeah, no, but you're asking questions that they could have been prepared for, and we could have had a better answer. No, I'm sorry.
I've got one. Just the final one's quite easy. There doesn't seem to be any 5 and 10 year, 15-year visualizations in the pack.
Okay, we'll take that as noted. Okay. Any other questions for clarification? Councillor
Just
Cumbers.
like to make the point really, if somebody thinks of something after the briefing, it's not right that they should be frightened into not mentioning it.
I didn't say that. I didn't mean to imply it if that was the case. All I'm saying is I want to be fair to everybody here, and that's both the members and the officers, that we treat each other with respect and that we give each other the best opportunity to have all the information we need and not to put people on the spot. Councillor Cumbers.
Understand that, but I think we're all trying to do a good job here. And personally, I mean, I'd have no problem with a 5-minute recess, you know, so the officer can get on top of this stuff. It wouldn't bother me at all. But I think, I mean, I've been criticised for asking a question before the this meeting started. I thought I was doing the right thing, and I got criticised for it.
Well, I'll ask you why, because it wasn't me. Let's put it that way. Yeah, okay. Any other comments that anybody would like to make, or any councillor Almond?
It is a question, and I apologise if I ought to know the answer, but I may have missed it. I've read so much and attended briefings and visits. It's coming out my ears because this is a very complicated and important application and deserves our full attention. Can I refer to page 15 at paragraph 7.1.24? That the last sentence says, further evaluation is recommended, comprising of a field evaluation should take place prior to determination. Now, I can't remember whether I've asked this already, but can I ask it now? Was that extra evaluation done, and what was the result? Thank you.
So in terms of how we set out the consultee responses, the most recent response is above. So at 7.1.23, we received a response on the 18th of October.
An email trail. I've got to read it backwards. Right. Oh, okay. You have to forgive me, but my eyes are popping out and I don't always see these things. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. In that case, then I'd like to move on to the speakers for this evening. We have two speakers. The first is the applicant, Mr. Chris Atkinson. If you'd like to come forward to the table, thank you very much. I think you've had a slight briefing on to press the small face in the button. When the red light comes on, the microphone is active. Once you start speaking, you'll have 3 minutes. Tom will give you a warning at 30 seconds from the end. If you can start summing up at that point, that would be very much appreciated. Thanks very much.
Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Chris Atkinson and I'm the Senior Planning Manager at Nebenton Power. The UK Government have published a net zero strategy which seeks to provide a fully decarbonised energy system by 2035. The strategy is clear that to achieve these goals, the deployment of renewable energy at scale and at speed is critical. In 2019, Melton Borough Council took the laudable step of declaring a climate emergency, in which they set out their aim of being a carbon neutral borough by 2030. Members of the Planning Committee have an opportunity to support this development and make a contribution towards achieving those goals, as the proposed solar farm will provide enough energy to power nearly 4,000 homes with green energy. This issue is particularly pressing as gas prices have been at an all-time high due to our reliance on imported energy, leading to increases in energy bills. The development of solar farms such as this will help to increase our energy independence. The application was submitted in September 2023, and we've worked to resolve all issues raised by consultees, which has culminated in no objections and a recommendation of approval from the case officer. For reference, Twyford and Thorpe Satchwell Parish Council's assertion that the scheme has significantly increased in scale during the course of the application is incorrect and it should be disregarded. They've raised concerns regarding the potential flood risk from the development. However, we should not lose sight of the fact that solar farms create minimal impermeable areas. The drainage schemes put forward are designed to manage surface water on site and then discharge off site at existing greenfield rates. This ensures that the pre-development drainage situation is maintained, and in this instance, significant betterment is proposed due to the future-proofing and oversizing that has been designed into the drainage schemes. The lead local flood authority and environment agency have raised no objections to the scheme, and we're happy to accept the suggested drainage conditions, which require us to submit a finalised drainage scheme prior to the commencement of development, which must be approved in writing by Melton Borough Council. In terms of other issues, the land has been assessed as grade 3B and 4 and is not therefore best and most versatile agricultural land. The landowner does not consider the land to be suitable for crops and as such is used for sheep grazing. Therefore, there'll be no impact upon food production.
30 seconds.
Thank you. A robust landscaping scheme is also proposed that would substantially mitigate views of the site from the surrounding area. The landscaping scheme also provides ecological benefits, and the scheme will achieve a BNG of 67%. In summary, we've worked with the plan officer and statutory consultees to ensure that development is brought forward that is fully compliant with all national and local planning policy. This has been reflected by the fact that no objections have been raised by technical consultees and the officer recommendation for approval. We hope that members acknowledge the significant
Thank you very much
benefits.
for your time. Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions for clarification from the applicant? Councillor Mason.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Just refer to the drainage solutions. I know there's two drainage solutions, which I've read. One relies on infiltration, permeation, and the other may involve attenuation with that, but let alone an attenuation a solution on its own. So there's two solutions which you can go by. I just wanted to know on the site plan that I've got a copy here that there doesn't appear any room for any attenuation infrastructure. Can you just enlighten me how that would come about if attenuation was needed?
Thank you for your question. In the flood risk assessment that we submitted with the application, at the appendix to the flood risk assessment, the two drainage options, there is a plan which shows where the drainage, whether it's the swale option or the or the attenuation option. It indicates where the attenuation basin would be located within the development site. It's kind of on the northern side of the site.
Would that mean removal of any of the panels from the site? So you still maintain the 22,500 panels?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Atherton.
I've got a couple relating to the traffic management plan, please. Table 2.2 intrigues me because you've shown how much extra HGV movement there will be. What intrigues me about that is the kind of 0.3 of a low loader. Is the intention to use a single company to provide the transport with loads shared? Or does that 13.3 actually really mean 14 low loaders, in which case there's probably a not insignificant increase in the number of HGV loads needed? And if you don't mind, a supplementary question, and I know the Leicester Highways Authority have said that the B6047 is suitable from Melton Mowbray to Twyford for HGVs, and indeed it is used by HGVs. But given the extra traffic load, would it not be wiser to use the A47 to the B6047 rather than transport through Melton Mowbray for traffic that needs to come off the A1 from the north?
In answer to your first question, the way it works with a solar farm, I think the vast majority of solar farms that are built around the country, whilst we would develop and own and operate a solar farm, we actually don't construct it. It's contractors or an EPC as they're known as. So in terms of they're utilised for construction and the construction vehicles and who they're employed to do that. It's ultimately their decision as opposed to ours. So I in answer to that question, it would be the EPC, the contractor, who would determine which, who they use to for the construction vehicles. And then I think in your second question, I mean, ultimately, our highways consultant set out a construction routing option. I mean, initially it was actually going to go, well, the traffic was going to be split. It was going to travel west. Well, there's going to be two options. One go west from the site up to Quinnieborough and then to the A6 or 7. And then it was always going to go east as well, and then south onto the B6 or 47 down to the A47. So that was the original plan. That's what we proposed. But then Leicester County Council Highways requested that we didn't route the traffic to the west through Quinnieborough, and that it actually all went east, and then splits can either go north to the A47 or south to the A47. So that was advised to us, and the suggestion that Leicester, they've considered the highways routing, they consider it to be safe and suitable. So we're happy to do so if that's their recommendation.
Thank you. Any other members have any other questions for clarification? Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Just one more question. In the officer report, I note a paragraph which is very useful actually. So thank you, Amy, for that. And it's 878, 8.8. In the officer report, it comments that the concentration of channeling as the rain runs off the panels, it concentrates underneath the panels and it tends to channel and erode and causes a channeling effect of the water. Obviously, the water runs along those channels in any direction it chooses to, because that's the nature of water, I suppose. How would you accommodate? Have you any sense how you would accommodate that a phenomenon being incorporated into a test, so we understand what the runoff, what the actual runoff from the site is?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting interesting concept, this, because I've worked in the solar industry for 5 or 6 years. I've been to multiple operational solar farms, and I've never seen this occur at all. There's numerous people that work in Benton Power. I asked them the question, are you aware of this phenomenon? And they're not. Now, that's not to say that doesn't happen on any solar farm, but I would imagine that in the UK there's probably anywhere between maybe 500 and 1,000 operational solar farms. Now, my view is that if this is a common occurrence on solar farms, if it was happening on most of these 500, for example, solar farms that are operational, there would be guidance at a national level, technical guidance at a national level, which would firstly acknowledge it as a phenomenon, but secondly, set out guidance as to how you would deal with it. Now, there is no such guidance, and I would ultimately take that to mean that it's not something that occurs all that frequently. But setting that aside, I just don't envisage that this would occur on this particular solar farm. I think there's a perception that under the panels that it's kind of bare earth, but that's absolutely not the case. The big grass under the panels, and obviously with grass, it doesn't create these channels because the vegetation captures the water and just ensures that it infiltrates at its usual rates as a pre-development scenario. And I think the other thing just to point out is I think there's a bit of a misconception with solar farms. So I think with the rows of panels, I think people assume it's one big row, solid row of panel, but in actual fact, there's multiple gaps all along the row of panels. Now, they're not a huge gap; they're about sort of 1 to 2 centimeters each, and there's sort of several reasons why there are these gaps, but one of them is to allow surface water to disperse evenly off the panel. So this perception that it comes off the edge of the panel and down, while some of the water will do that, there's other water that is dispersing through the gaps, so it spreads out that dispersal of the water. So again, it helps to reduce the potential for this kind of thing occurring.
Councillor Allnutt.
Thank you. We read, as we always do with solar panel farms, that they're temporary for 40 years, which brings a smile to my face. I should be 165, I think. Yes, we understand why that's there. That's to ensure that it can be reclaimed if necessary. Although which officer is going to be alive in 40 years, I don't know. We'll wait and see. Now, but I also read in your other answers to questions that the panels themselves have a 30-year guarantee, which sort of implies that sometime before the end of the 40 years, they may be replaced. So my question is about disposal of redundant panels, because in the ordinary course of events, as I understand it, they're not biodegradable. And for those of us who live through cathode ray tubes and the deposits of mercury, we're concerned about how we dispose of them. Can you give any statement tonight about how that, what would be the approach to that disposal at the end of their 30 to 40 years? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. So solar panels actually about 90% of the components of a solar panel are actually recyclable. I mean, a large proportion of the solar panel is glass, so there is already that existing process in place to recycle glass. Then you've got kind of metallic components, copper, wiring, etc. within it. Again, that's fully recyclable. The mounting frames and the frames that are actually around the panel itself, again, recyclable. So 90% of a panel is actually recyclable, and there are programs in place now whereby you can partner up with companies who will kind of take on board that recycling for you when solar panels, if they are replaced. There is also it may be that some panels are actually just reused elsewhere, so they may have a secondary life elsewhere if they are taken from the site. But yeah, 90% of a solar panel can be recycled.
So what about the 10%? Is that going to kill me, or what happens? What is the 10%? Is it something really nasty that can be dealt with, or have we got to put it in with the nuclear waste?
I don't. It's not something that's going to. It's not something that's going to kill you. I don't think. No, but I think there's just as with some things at this moment in time, there is not ability to recycle it. So.
Thank you. Any further questions? In that case, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your presentation. And next I'll call Councillor Lee Higgins, the Ward Councillor. I have no need to introduce the microphone to. As with all speakers, you'll have 3 minutes. Tom will give you a 30-second warning, and if you could start closing at that time, that would be very much appreciated.
Can you? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. The government and NBC severely need to come up with some policy about solar farms that's going to not just hit this borough, but everywhere else. All these applications are going to come in and flood the planning authority and all over the country. Remember where experts told us all to buy diesel cars because they were better? I'll leave that there. Twyford, as you know, because residents have come up here before, and Mick Jones, our now resigned Parish Council Chair, has talked about flooding and his frustration with statutory consultees. I sometimes sit over there and I understand the obligations that's placed on you tonight. However, as the Ward Councillor, and why I'm speaking as Ward Councillor, this is why I feel that the statutory consultees are letting us down and passing me and our residents and our parish council round from pillar to post. I'm being passed around from the local planning authority to the lead flood authority to the Environment Agency, and everyone's pointing the other way. The LLFA have refused to meet with our parish council, And then when I've asked for that, I had to do 3 chases and still have refused to meet. I'm seriously considering raising this further. The Environment Agency raised no objection, but they don't look at it if it's in flood zone 1. So the issue that we have in and around Twyford is I do not believe the Lead Flood Authority, in my view and many others, understands the issues we face in Twyford, and nor has it been willing to meet with us. We've met with the leader of the council, the deputy leader of the council, and various other planning officers about this. Twyford has had projects by the EA and it has alleviated flood risk. However, what's happening in the most recent years, something has changed. And while I'm not going to go on about this one tonight, a planning application has been approved, which the design and access statement and the flood risk assessment do not meet what has been the built form. And all I'm getting from the statutory consultees and various partners is everybody finger pointing, but not taking the responsibility. It displaces potentially over around 500,000 litres of water. So yes, very frustrated is the community of Twyford and myself, and this must be happening elsewhere as we hear as ward councillors ourselves. To close up, I'd like to thank Amy and Mick Jones, and sadly he has resigned. It's just got too much for him, and he did some sterling work on this to raise about the flood concerns here. We would like to understand the proper flood risk assessments before permission was passed, rather than set by condition. And again, to engage properly with the LLFA to make sure that Twyford is not a more future risk of flooding, which will affect properties, people, and their property. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Higgins. Would any members like to ask any questions for further clarification from the councillor? No. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much for the presentations. Just before I open this up for debate, I'd probably echo some of the points that Councillor Higgins has just made, and just remind the committee that, and those watching, that whatever our personal opinion, our remit and power, such as it is, are restricted to this application. It's for others, with the correct authority and expertise, to consider the wider issues and to act on those. We may wish outside of this committee to make presentations to those people. But as a committee knows, it is difficult without the recognised qualified expert comment to challenge those bodies, such as local highways or the flood authority, to actually challenge their decisions. What is in our remit, though, is to make sure that we are satisfied that any application does not make it worse. That's our job within this. So I'd just like to put that point in before we sort of move into debate on this one. And whatever conditions that we may wish, with whichever way we decide to go forward. But saying that, I'd like to give others an opportunity to speak. So Councillor Allnutt first.
I'm hoping this will be my last contribution tonight. I want to thank Amy for a very comprehensive report and all the subsequent information, and also to the objectors for their objections and what they've given to us. I've visited the site 3 times, and I have, as Councillor Higgins mentioned, been to the site to look at the general problem of flooding in Twyford, not this particular application, because that would be contrary to the rules. And I want to place on record my thanks to Mick Jones for his hospitality and his very thoughtful approach to the practical issues of flooding throughout the area. And I echo your words, Chair, that this needs to be taken up in a wider forum. This is, as you know, I'm rather hot on this issue, and I'm very frustrated by the lack of progress across the borough and across our nation. It's a travesty, frankly. But moving on, I have listened very carefully to everything I've heard tonight, and I haven't not made a predetermination. But of course, I have considered very carefully all the evidence and the opinions. And I will wait to hear what other colleagues have to say before making my final decision on this, because I need to hear everyone's point of view and to set out the arguments for and against. In particular, I'm very interested to see what Councillor Mason has to say in response to the various questions he posed in relation to the data sets, their sources and the analysis. I must say I did find the response from the applicant regarding the privacy of a piece of software a bit much, frankly. I would have thought at least it could have been shared in confidence to the member asking the question, because the modelling is quite important, I think. However, at the moment, I do think that on balance, when you look at the harms and the benefits, I would lean towards approving the application. But as I say, I want to hear more. However, there are some important other points I wish to make. In general, the strongest argument against this particular application, in my opinion, is the landscape one. And I did find that trying to navigate my way through the comments on landscape and the LVIA, I found that quite difficult. And I know other members will probably feel the same, that I'm not really certain whether it's a moderate or a significant factor in this case. So I'd like to hear a bit more about that. Now, of course, the big one is the construction traffic management. And I have to say, and I agree with, I'm sure I agree with a lot of other members, I think that the County Council's Highway Department must be confusing Twyford, Melton with Twyford, Arizona, because once again, we're dished up with a not very believable analysis of the traffic conditions in the area. But they are the experts. And as you pointed out, Chair, we've got to accept their views. But I have a question on this. We are entitled to put conditions down, and I would like to see some strong conditions put down to restrict traffic flows before certain times of the day and after certain times and at weekends. I think that should be put in place. And I would like to hear from officers how we can monitor what actually happens on the ground, because we've all experienced other plans going ahead where people turn up on sites at 6:30 in the morning making rackets, and all sorts of things are promised beforehand, but they don't quite come to fruition. So I am concerned about that. I'm grateful for the comment about the disposal of solar panels, and I think that's something for a wider consideration at another time, and it doesn't of itself prevent this from happening. Now, on flooding, I've looked at the details as best I can with a magnifying glass. I have to say that I do disagree with my good friend Lee Higgins a little bit on this. I think this particular application will not affect the general flooding problem in Twyford. That will be affected by other things. And if, in fact, if it's done properly, and that has to be said, if it's done properly, the applicant has said there may be some betterment, although I believe, if I remember correctly, we mustn't consider betterment when we're looking at applications. No doubt Tom will put me right if I'm wrong.
I think the point is we can't insist on betterment.
Yeah, we can't insist, but I think, if it's done properly, it might be marginally good. Now, I'm getting near the end, Chair. Page 17, we've got the objections from our MP Edward Agar, who I've met several times. He's a jolly nice chap. We get on very well. And he repeats a couple of things, but I would cross-refer page 17, 7.2.7 with page 8 at 1.6 and 1.7, where quite clearly the policies were determined nationally at the beginning of 2024. And I will be contacting him to ask him if he was awake when those conditions went through Parliament, or whether he was asleep, because I'm not certain that he was awake. Yes. And that concludes my comments. I wait to hear what other members say.
Amy, are you okay to come back on the condition question?
So in terms of your question or query about the hours of operation during the construction phase, the construction traffic management plan does actually talk about hours of operation. At 2.36 of that report, it says it is expected that the following site operational times during the construction phase will be as follows. Site open for non-noise invasive works, Monday to Friday, 7:30 till 6:30 p.m. and Saturday, 7:30 till 4:30 p.m. Site fully open for works including heavy machinery and deliveries, Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5:30 and Saturday, 9 till 1. The site will not be open on Sundays or on designated public holidays. We do have a condition which secures the construction traffic management plan, so that would secure that detail.
In other words, member, read the papers properly.
Well, no. Can I just clarify that? What are HGV lorries? Sort of normal lorries, not plant delivery. Yeah, ordinary HGV transport. What would they be classed as, and what hours would they be restricted to?
So site fully open for works including heavy machinery and deliveries. Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5:30. Saturday, 9 till 1.
Councillor Atherton.
Yeah, come back to the traffic management plan and notwithstanding Leicester Highways Authority acceptance that the B6047 is rated for HGV traffic, I'd like to have documented my concern about the potential additional HGV traffic through Melton Mowbray, Great Dalby, Thorpe Satchville and over the Humpback Bridge in Twyford itself. I see no reason that HGV traffic should come that way when access to the A1 for both north and southbound traffic can be done from the A47, which is much more suitable. I know they've still got to travel the B6047 through the one village, but Tilton on Hill. But that route is much more suitable, in my opinion, at least. And I do have some HGV driving experience. So I'd just like to register my concern about that extra traffic, please. I know there's nothing we can do about it. I asked the applicant to take cognizance of that and route traffic via the A47, if at all possible. But I'd just like my concern noted on paper, please.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can note that in the minutes then. Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, my concern at the moment, and I know you haven't heard from the Civil Aviation Authority, but my concern is that aircraft movements, and I know it's the ascending and descending concerning glare. Now, obviously, there was a plane went across that somebody told us about. I think it was you, Don. I'm not sure. And as it was flying across, obviously, you know, the glare could have made a difference. But as I've been told, it is the ascending and descending of a plane where the glare would make the worst thing to happen. Now, the thing I'm thinking about is that planes can descend, I can put it, quite early on in their flight, and it's not something that you'd perhaps notice, not even passengers could notice and people on the ground. So it starts quite early before you notice they're descending. So this is what's worrying me, because I just want to be sure that they're safe, that there isn't any glare. As I say, it does start early sometimes, and it's not always noticeable. But also, I want to make sure there's absolutely no interference with the radar equipment or systems. But I think we should wait to hear from the Civil Aviation Authority, or have something to say that if it does go through, it will rely on the Civil Aviation Authority.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor, if that's okay. But I think the and I'll ask for anybody to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's about distracting the pilot while they're ascending and descending. And I think the nearest airport is 16, I can't remember if it was 14 or 16 kilometres away, the one at Leicester. So again, the chances of it putting into a position, sorry, Councillor, do you want to, have you better knowledge than I am?
Yeah, probably, given that I've got 300 hours of flying in and out of Leicester Airport, it will not be a concern to Leicester Airport. It's outside their sphere of influence. The same can be said, in my opinion, about East Midlands Airport. The standard arrival and departure routes, don't take them anywhere near that. Standard arrival route into East Midlands from that part of the world pretty much tracks the A6. Standard departure routes don't go anywhere near that from memory. They tend to kind of track along the M1 more than out this way. Standard arrival and departure routes, if we're really concerned, are freely available on the web, and if anybody wants to look, I can interpret them for them. But as they pass over Leicester City, they're at least 5,000 feet up, and this particular solar farm will not be of any distraction to them whatsoever, in my opinion. Similarly, for the radar, it won't know it's there. And I expect any solar farm in the area of East Midlands Airport, there is no radar at Leicester Airport. They'll mark it on their maps as an object and filter it out.
Thank you for that. Does that answer your question? Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask for any, Councillor Pritchett?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think on the flooding, let's not forget Ashby Folville downstream. You know, they claim that there's £30,000 of damage in one or more houses, as well as Twyford. Thank you very much, Chair. It seems to me that when you deal with the limited heritage, noise, archaeology and all that sort of thing, you're left with the landscape impact. And I think that we need to recognise that this is one of the jewel of the borough. We hear about the Vale of Belvoir, but these valleys and troughs in that area are what's called and recorded as quintessentially Leicestershire. In that area, I, as with Amy, at the desk, I found the landscape visual impact assessment excellent. I made the journey to the recommended viewing point with Councillor Mason. I then went back to all the viewpoints and walked the footpaths over 2 days. I went to the nursery. So I've been around and considered it and agonised over it. The inherent issue you've got here, and we need to forget it, is that the site is on a slope, which there are various comments from about topography from Natural England and generally others. So we shouldn't forget that. And it's a need to make sure that we get it right. Now, I went through all the documents, sometimes 3 times on the portal and other documents, to get to my conclusion that it just gets over the line, this one, and I would support it. But I would say it's like a 10-round boxing match that gets over the line on points, not a clear winner. And I'm afraid why I'm saying all this is that, and I've been through the glimpses, the road is not a top quality viewing point because you're going along at the time you're going to be on the footpaths, and took it all into account. Now, I don't like it, but I think it just gets over the line. And I think once you go out on the footpath from Barsby, the field, and you've got Ashby Folville, corner of your left eye, the valley of Twyford, you think, what the hell are you doing putting solar farm there? So I don't like it, but I've been through a full analysis. I don't think the report under the landscape visual impact assessment and the conclusion draws it all properly out of the landscape visual impact assessment and in the conclusion of the planning balance. I'm not happy about that, but I've done it myself before I actually looked at the report. It is a significant area. And when I mentioned cumulative impact, you've only got to have it in one in 2 or 3 valleys there, and the whole of the character of the area is ruined in that area. And I'll finish by saying that because of the numbers of applications, Rushcliffe have commissioned a policy, landscape sensitivity and impact, as just to analyse the impact, the types of landscape in their area, and just how many solar farms can it cope, and what are the judging criteria. And I think we need to bring that in. We've got one on flatland west of Barkston. We've got one that appears visually when you're there to be at the foot of Beaver Castle and various other things. Now we've got one on what I would call our most prized area in the borough. So where's the next one going to be? And if you look at the landscape visual impact assessment, the guy who did it, you know, he did notice there were some impact. And what I'm saying about this one is its size. And that's not necessarily, in other words, if you were to give me a 50-acre one, I wouldn't, you know, if you start to get another field bigger, then I'm tipping over to no. So size matters as well on this one, I think, and I don't want to see any more. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Don't say it like that, Chair. Despite the leader's comment, I'm not going to go into a treatise on the mathematics of solar farms, I promise you, so I'm not going to bore you to death. Thank you. Obviously, my major concern is the flooding. Otherwise, that's axiomatic from the comments I've made tonight. And it's always left to the decision makers, and we are the decision makers. And in viewing the decision makers, we have to take into account what are appropriate in the circumstances, and indeed what's not only what's appropriate in the circumstances, but the specifics of the site itself. And I find that when it comes to flooding, I don't know what the specifics are, because if we approve this, I shall approve it with a condition that 2 flood schemes may come forward, and that's dependent on infiltration tests, etc., 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 and take into account. And I don't disbelieve the applicant's representative, but there's some disparity between what our planner is saying in terms of the way that water runs off panels and has a channeling effect. And I erred to that. I erred to that view. And so before I can make a decision, I need to know what the specifics are. And I need to know that in taking account of those specifics, that we're not going to create more of a problem by solving a climate crisis, but creating maybe a flooding issue, i.e. the rule of unintended consequences. And that's where I look at it from. And what I require, personally, I can't say what you require. What I require is some input into that process of whereby we can put a check and balance into the system, whereby we can monitor what the appropriate level of attenuation, infiltration tests apply to this site, so we can make a decision at some point in the future, so that we can say to that, yes, we had all the specifics, we took into account the circumstances, and we played our part in making the right decision, not only for the applicant, but for the community itself. So I'm trying to find a way to put together where we can come together at some point and review what the flood risk assessment and the solution is, so that we can actually say, yes, okay, we're happy now and we can move forward. And I look to my colleagues on the top table to give me a solution to that, because I'm like our lawyer, I'm not a planner.
Yeah, can I ask Louise to answer?
Thank you. So you briefly picked up on the drainage conditions, which form part of the report and the recommendation. So those conditions have been suggested by the Flood Authority, and they're obviously part of the proposal in front of you. What One thing that may help is that information will have to come forward. That will have to form a formal discharge of condition application. Once that discharge of condition application is registered, it is then obviously in the public realm. It will go for consultation to the lead local flood authority and other invested parties. But what you then have the opportunity to do as a member is obviously call that in. So at the point that the discharge of condition is submitted and is live, obviously at that point members can review the information. If you're not satisfied with it, we can have ongoing dialogue with the applicant, with the LLFA, but ultimately there is that call-in mechanism as well, if that's helpful to you.
Using that mechanism, Louise, is there some point in that mechanism, a trigger where we can say, well, we're just not satisfied with this. We need to send it back. It's a bit like the House of Lords and House of Commons. We're not happy with this. We need more information. We need better information, and we just don't believe this will work. How does that mechanism work in those circumstances?
So the information would obviously come forward. It'll then be assessed, like I say, with the LLFA. At that point, we need to understand what the drainage strategy is. And at that point, the details will then obviously be apparent and they will be assessed. If there is a difference of opinion between yourselves or residents and the LLFA, you know, a bit like we do with the planning application, we can seek further information, we can provide clarification, we can have that dialogue at that point.
And that will give me the site specific and the circumstances and everything else I'm seeking to make a decision. The problem I have with that is that the decision's been made. I'm minded to support solar farms because you see all the terrible events in and around the world, and we should, and quite rightly, we should play our part. But I don't want to play our part at any cost. I want to play our part, and I want everyone to be as comfortable as they can, and that's a hard trick to pull off. But I don't know what other members think of that route.
Councillor Allnutt.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jim. Yes, when it comes back to committee for discharge of the condition, not the water, that is, we will be faced with the same legal advice from Tom that, well, it's come from the LFR. We can't sort of tell them that they're wrong. So what Jim's saying is that there must be some input before it gets to committee so that we can actually look at the nuts and bolts and really crawl over it and say, look, we're not happy with this. Can we look at it? That's what we're really saying, aren't we, Jim? And I think that's what those of us who are really concerned about the flooding problem per se, we feel we're adrift. No pun intended, but we are. We at no point do we have any opportunity really to say, look, this is wrong and we've got to stop it. We're faced with this. Well, you can't stop it because they're the experts, and that's why we get upset about it.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably helpful for me to qualify that advice and the general advice. So yes, the general advice is that to go against expert opinion or expert advice is dangerous. That is where you don't have another expert opinion to contradict that. If you have another expert that says, no, that isn't correct, by all means, you are able to do that. What we always recommend against doing is going against expert advice without having another expert's advice. So if during the deliberation of that application for the discharge, there are concerns, there's nothing to stop you or the planners from getting another expert opinion. If that does go against that, then you are within your rights to do so. So I think it's important to have that qualification on the general position.
Councillor Allnutt, does that answer? Yeah. Councillor.
So just to follow up on that then, Tom, is it possible at all before the submission is made to committee to have the relevant experts here in some kind of workshop that we can talk and discuss the scheme, so that if we do have any concerns or we believe it's wrong based on experience, based on local knowledge, we can put that to them and understand how they've arrived at their position?
I think it's difficult to have them here in that forum in this meeting. Certainly beforehand, though, questions can be raised, and I would suggest that at that point, you're probably not offering opinion or debate. You're probably asking relevant questions about the accuracy of points. The more time that you have to do that before the meeting, the better, because you're going to get an answer. But I see no reason why, when that comes forward, if there are concerns or questions that raises, why those questions can't be put. I'm sure the office will be able to assist with that.
And I suppose I would add to that, I'm sure the ward councillor would be watching it very, very closely so that it won't go under the radar. And as a discharge of conditions.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a further quick point. Councillor Allnutt referred to when the discharge application comes back. Clearly, you can't call in an application that doesn't exist yet. So I just wanted to clarify that until it comes in and it is called in, it won't come back automatically. The Constitution sets out when an application will come forward. I'm not saying it can't, but it just needs to be clear that it's not definitive.
I'm sure that everyone's listening and will, within the Constitution, ensure that it's called in if there's a problem. But the workshop mode is good because it enables the ward member, and I don't know whether parishes are allowed to, but it's so vital, isn't it, to get people's confidence in the system and that we're on their side and trying to get solutions and not just nod things through or put barriers up, as the case may be. I think the workshop mode is very useful, Chair.
Councillor, sorry, I just wanted to, I'll come in a second. Councillor Mason, I just wanted to make sure you instigated this question. You're okay, and no, but are you happy with what we've talked about? Yeah.
I just want to listen to what other members have to say, because obviously they are the decision maker, the same as I am.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Cumbers. Yeah.
Just a little bit, really. I can remember two applications where members went against highways advice, but we were told actually it's advice. Now, I can't remember what happened with one of them, but the other one was up Burton Road, and I remember very clearly, you know, that it was solid, and the officers, you know, recommended permit, and we refused, and it went to appeal, and our decision was okay, you know. So, but this is different. But as a principle, it's not. We're not being ordered to follow that advice, but we've got to really be careful, you know, and pay proper heed to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, apologies if I implied that it was we couldn't. It's just saying as what Tom just said is very difficult. Councillor Pritchard.
Chair, everything that Councillor Higgins said about the concern with flooding, Councillor Allnutt, Councillor Mason, and you've had a snippet or two, and Pat, are all down here on my list. And if you think about the extra concern you've got in the Gadsby and the Reet valleys, right, and people are worried, and we're all confused about the rules. We get a bit of paper back from Leicester saying everything's all right. You know, different areas have different calculations. We've got drainage issues and suds full of weeds, no water. We've had issues, and people are scared. Climate change, and we need to actually understand and bottom it. And I quite support what Councillor Mason has said.
Any other members? Councillor.
Yeah, I'd like to draw your attention to condition 10.17, please. It's quite an interesting one to me. It's about what happens should the solar farm fail to produce electricity, be that all of it or a substantial part of it for a given period. How do we monitor whether the solar farm is producing electricity or not, in order to know whether that condition is complied with? or not? And if we can't monitor it, is the condition really worth having? I like it, don't get me wrong, but if we can't monitor it, if we can't get accurate information about the electricity produced, is it just a condition on paper?
While I'm looking to see if anybody, is this just to the beginning of it, or is during its operation throughout the 30 or 40 years? Okay.
So condition 10.17 is a compliance condition where the responsibility to meet the criteria of that condition falls on the developer.
Right. So I understand what the condition's about, but how do we monitor it to know whether they have complied or not?
So we're not required to monitor it. It's a compliance condition where the responsibility of the monitoring is on the developer.
So the developers say, yeah, we're producing. Sorry, so the developer just says, we're producing electricity. I would.
Yeah, it's a fair point. A fair point, I think. And I mean, we may come back to that later if we're thinking. But Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just listen to everybody. I agree with everything that's been said. I've just been listening here attentively because obviously it's people with more knowledge than me on these matters, etc. But we're sitting here again questioning things without full reports and full substantiated documents that would probably lead us to a decision. And I find it frustrating, and no disrespect to this local authority, but it's got a pretty poor record at following up on conditions. You know, I can look at my ward, I'm still following up on conditions. I still haven't had answers months after months after months. I think, in my view, we should defer this and send it away and bring it back with all these questions being answered. That's the only thing that I think we should do, because if you don't bring something that's robust enough, how can you have the confidence within it? And then it's no good to the good people of Twyford and Councillor Higgins and everybody else in 12 months after it's been built that there's an issue. So, you know, I just want to make the point, please. And that's my view on it, and I think that's what we should do in that respect. So just let's hear what everybody else has to say.
No, the question I was going to ask was, well, what documents do you feel that we need to be able to make a decision?
That we need to do. What you're going to do to discharge the condition, you know, you're discharging conditions after you're starting on site or whatever, etc. Some of this stuff should be done up front. That's my view of it.
Just one of those points there. With regards to the drainage, the specific wording of the condition is the development will not go ahead if we can't agree on the flood risk assessment. So no development approved by this planning permission shall take place until X, Y, Z. So they can't get on site until the drainage has been agreed.
Bring back an example. There's a site in my ward where the drainage is all over the place and nobody's checked anything. So how do we guarantee that that's going to happen? And we're going to check it. That's what I want to know. You know, are we going to go up there and check that they're going to do it? They're not going to start the work, etc. Because that wasn't discharged on that particular condition. Nobody discharged anything. They just ploughed on ahead. I'm just making the point that this authority is not as robust as maybe what it's saying it is. We've got the evidence. I'm just saying, do we want the same issue up in this ward, in this particular ward as well?
Any other members?
I'm just down to I think a condition issue. Yes, I can relate to that one. We've got that issue in Bodyford. Just one final point, but first, when I said I didn't think the report on landscape and the conclusion fully wrestled with and explained all the issues, to justify the recommendation. If members were minded, it's left the door open if people wanted to go the other way. So it's not closed that door. Now I'm left now with cumulative impact. This site is on the Harborough and Charnwood borders. One site was found in the September 2023 landscape visual impact in another valley, right? Small site, self-contained site. Where do members want to go now if we do inch towards approving this without a cumulative assessment?
Do any members wish to make a comment? Councillor Allnutt.
Yeah, I thought I heard my good friend Don say earlier that if this had been a 50-acre site, it would be a problem in terms of approval. Yeah, but yeah, and I would tend to agree with you. At that size, it would be a bit too big. So that sort of implies that if any other applications come up which start to take the accumulated total towards 50, we would be looking at that application on its merits at that point. I mean, I thought you were saying that there isn't anything in the vicinity.
The landscape architect that did the LVIA found one. Let's say if there's another 3 positions since then, that needs reviewing again. It has to be reviewed, taking those things into account, that one aspect. You can use the rest of the report, but that has to be taken into account. So I think we've been through this, I think, at the Musson, and I thought the significance of that, the point was made there.
Sorry, go on,
can I understand then? If Councillor Pritchett is saying that we should defer in order to get an accumulative assessment, I'd like to hear what the officers have got to say about that, whether it's, in their view, something that could be done quickly or not. Because I thought the assessment of what's in the area is fairly extant. It's not ancient knowledge. So can we hear from the officers about if we defer to get that thing done? Because the officers will quite rightly say, if we choose to defer, we've got to be specific. We can't go down Councillor Ronan Brown's line of, well, I'm just generally dissatisfied and I want to generally defer until we get some answer to some unspecified items. We have to be specific. Now, if Don is saying, let's defer it for that thing to get the then let's hear what the officers have got to say about that.
In people for what their views are, including the top table.
I'll just make my comment then and see if any of the officers, I mean, because the point I made when you first said that was that, one, I don't believe there's any been built in the local area. I'm not sure with the one that you mentioned. What you mentioned.
Permissions, Chair. It doesn't have to be milled. It's approvals.
So, sorry, I'm just giving my opinion on this one, and that I haven't seen any built, and I don't know of any other applications in the local area. And again, the cumulative would actually come in, as Councillor Allnutt was saying, with the cumulative problem would actually then come into place. But I don't believe there are any others. So that's why I'm sort of saying, do you want to make that? What's the time period you make for the report?
Yeah. Checked with the records at Harborough and Charnwood, as well as local. I mean, let's do the job properly if we're going to do the job.
Thank you, Chair. So from the landscape and visual impact assessment, there was an assessment done of the cumulative landscape effects, and that's at point 6.3. A search was undertaken on solar farms within the vicinity which had been approved and are operational. There was one solar farm in the 3-kilometre assessment area, and the name of that solar farm was Hill Farm Solar Farm, which is not in view from the site. No cumulative effects will arise from the proposed Hill Farm Solar Farm because the scheme is not in close proximity. It's on the opposite side of the valley and within a separate landscape character area with no intervisibility within the site. So the magnitude of the cumulative landscape effects was assessed to be none. So as a result of that, and following Amy looking actually and going out on the site, walking the site, conducting her own assessment of those landscape impacts, it was not considered that we need to undertake a separate cumulative impact study.
That was in I've read that that's September 2023. You know, what's gone through then. It's only a simple matter of collecting up and saying if it's nil, it's nil. And if there's something that's in the area, they need to be considered. But I'll leave it to you to think when if somebody proposes this, whether you want to go forward on it, and I'll make my own mind up what I'm going to do.
Councillor.
So I'd like to ask a question about paragraph 4.3 of the report, please. It's to do with connection of the solar farm to the grid. And it may not be material to this application per se, because it does say that it's separate to a separate planning application, and actually it'll be a separate planning application to two authorities, ourselves and Charnwood. Should we not have a condition such that no work should start until those two applications are approved? Because there doesn't appear to be a plan B. In other words, if we build the solar farm and connection to the route to connect to the grid is not approved for whatever reason, we've got 22,500 panels sat across 3 fields that do nothing.
I understand your point. I'm assuming that as a commercial organisation, they're not going to build it without those planning applications in place, and it's a chicken and egg sort of situation, which one goes first. But if we feel that there's a need for a condition within there to say that work is not to commence until that application is complete, is that possible?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't see why not. I think it could probably be worded something along the lines of development should not commence until such time that a grid connection has been approved or completed or something along those kind of lines.
Any further comments? And if no further comments, we have a recommendation to approve the application. We've talked about some additional conditions, but is there anybody that would like to make a comment? Councillor Mason?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If Never's going to propose a deferment, that would alter my opinion of the drainage, obviously. But in light of that, I don't think I was going to alter propose that. Can I have it recorded that I would like it called in, that but just recorded in the minutes that I have said that I shall be looking to call it in on the drainage front, on the drainage proposal. Okay, thank you.
Would anybody, that wasn't a proposal, though, was it? No. Would anybody like to make the proposal, Councillor?
There's just one question I'm asking, so it's quite simple. Will the bridleway have to be closed due to construction noise during the construction period? Because it could spook the horses, any sudden noise. Would that have to be closed?
And I'm told that's outside of planning. Yeah.
So given that, I think what you're looking for, subject to the additional condition that we've just agreed to about the connection to the grid being added, I'd like to propose acceptance of the scheme.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor, thank you very much. I mean, and that's in with the other conditions that we've talked about as well, which is the transport and the Oh no, so yeah, that was fine. It was just clarifying the transport. There wasn't any changes to it. I apologise, but they're already in the conditions. Yeah. Yeah, so yes, and as you just reminded, yes, it is as in the report with the one extra condition that we've just talked about the connection. So that is the proposal. It's been seconded. I'd therefore like to, unless there's any comments, to actually put that towards that proposal to the vote. Those in favour of the proposal? Yeah. Those against? Abstentions? So there's 5 for, then 5 for the proposal, 3 against, 2 abstentions. Therefore, the application is approved. Thank you for your time and thank you for your input, everybody. Thank you for your time and attendance. I'll now close this meeting at 7:30. Please drive safely on your way home. Thanks very much.